AI can think, it can calculate incredibly complex systems, it can even create art or, generate code that would take a human ages to finish.
It's really quite remarkable.
But here's the fundamental question, the one that sits right at the core of this whole age of intelligence. Can it feel? Can AI understand right from wrong? Or is it just destined to be this powerful but ultimately sort of amoral machine?
That is precisely the crossroads we're at.
Right.
And it's exactly the deep dive we're taking today. We're not just looking at the technical side, the capabilities,
Right.
but digging into its moral framework, or perhaps the lack of one. Our sources today really hone in on this dilemma, drawing heavily from excerpts from the book Ethics, Emotion, and the Human Code in AI by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
Okay. And our mission here is to pull out those core insights from his work. We're focusing specifically on how human ethics and, importantly, genuine emotion must act as the guidance system for this whole age of intelligence. Think of this as your essential kind of streamlined shortcut to understanding not just the what of AI, but the really critical should and ought behind how we use it.
And to set the stage for why this is so fundamentally a human problem, not just a technical one, the source shares this really illuminating anecdote. It's a scene at a university in Lahore. You have a robotics student clearly wrestling with the sheer scope of these new tools, asking her professor a pretty profound question. She asks, "Sir, if AI can learn everything, master all human knowledge, will it ever actually develop a conscience?"
Wow, that's the question, isn't it? And the power of the professor's reply is just its immediate clarity. He didn't launch into some complex philosophical argument. He just said, only if we, the creators, teach it what conscience means.
And that right there, that moment, it establishes the central, non-negotiable theme for this entire deep dive. The future character, the capability, and ultimately the morality of AI. It depends entirely on our morality, human morality. We're the coders of the conscience.
Whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's dive straight into this fundamental hurdle that the source calls the moral gap. We've gotten exceptionally good at building AI that can simulate human reasoning. We see it everywhere, right?
Absolutely. Large language models, complex diagnostic tools, massive data analysis.
Exactly. But Mr. Mir points out this critical flaw. Reasoning, even sophisticated reasoning, isn't the same thing as moral judgment.
That distinction is absolutely paramount. It's crucial. Reasoning is, well, it's mechanical. It's algorithmic.
Right.
It's the ability to process information, apply logic, calculate the most, say, efficient path to a goal that's already been set for it. AI is brilliant at that kind of optimized reasoning.
The classic analogy here, and it really helps ground the concept, is the calculator. A calculator can solve for x in some huge equation that's reasoning. It tells you 2 + 2 is 4 instantly. But the calculator has no way to decide if solving that equation is the right thing to do or if the answer leads to something good or bad.
Precisely. That decision needs judgment. And judgment requires an internal set of principles, values.
Which leads directly to this crucial finding in the source material. AI follows patterns, not principles.
Yes. AI systems, particularly the deep learning ones we hear so much about, are essentially pattern recognition engines. They ingest just millions, billions of data points, historical records, societal trends, past decisions.
All the stuff we've done before.
Exactly. And they learn correlations, regularities. They learn what has been. And they use that knowledge to predict what will likely be based on those patterns.
So what happens when those patterns themselves are inherently unjust? I mean, if the historical data reflects centuries of systemic bias in, say, hiring or lending or even healthcare?
Well, the AI registers that historical injustice as just, another stable, high-confidence pattern. It doesn't understand that the injustice itself is wrong.
It can't see the ethical violation.
No. It doesn't recognize that the pattern violates some fundamental principle of equity or fairness. It just sees this pattern exists, it's strong, and in its drive for efficiency or accuracy based on those past results, it just replicates it.
So efficiency often means just repeating the status quo, even if the status quo is biased.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
If, historically, excluding a certain group led to, say, less perceived financial risk or higher predictability in a model, the AI will mathematically gravitate towards repeating that pattern.
Because the math works out based on the past.
Correct. The algorithm has no internal foundational principle of fairness to override that statistically validated pattern of historical discrimination it learned from the data. It's just doing complex math on the past and projecting it forward.
Okay, this is where, for you listening, the aha moment really hits. This explains why these incredibly sophisticated, seemingly neutral AI systems can sometimes produce outcomes that are just clearly discriminatory or even nonsensical when faced with a new ethical dilemma.
Right. If the underlying ethical principle, the why behind the decision is missing, the system is fundamentally brittle. It's flawed at its core.
It lacks that moral weight, that ability to say, hold on, this efficient path, it's morally unacceptable.
And this lack of inherent moral principle, it forces us, the creators, the humans, back into the loop. We have to bear the burden of oversight. It raises that critical question.
Yeah.
If the most efficient path calculated by the AI is unethical, does the AI just choose efficiency anyway? Without principles, the answer is always yes.
Because that's what it was built to optimize for.
Exactly. That distance between optimization and responsibility, that's the moral gap.
Which connects straight to accountability, doesn't it? If an AI system acts unethically because it just followed a historical bias pattern, maybe denying essential services based on some statistical correlation, where does the responsibility lie? It can't be the machine, right? Since the AI lacks conscience, lacks moral judgment.
The source material is absolutely unequivocal on this. The central takeaway from really understanding this moral gap is that human morality is the invisible code. It's behind every algorithm.
Invisible code, I like that.
The machine's output, no matter how complex it seems, is always just a reflection of the input, the training data, and crucially, the ethical framework, or maybe the lack of one, provided by its human creators and operators.
So we can't outsource our moral responsibility.
Absolutely not. Not to the machine.
Okay, so if we accept that this moral gap exists and that human morality is absolutely paramount, then we need, well, practical instructions, don't we, for the developers, the engineers.
Right.
If we connect the problem, this conceptual gap, to the need for a solution, what practical steps does Mr. Mir say developers must take to actually close it?
Okay, so we shift now. We move from the, let's say, philosophical necessity of conscience to the practical guidelines for actually engineering integrity into these systems.
Right.
The source material details what it argues must be mandatory professional standards. It calls them the 3 pillars of ethical AI development.
3 pillars, okay.
These pillars are designed to translate that moral philosophy we've been discussing into actionable engineering practice, something concrete developers can use.
Let's hear them. What's the first pillar?
The first pillar is transparency, and the core requirement sounds deceptively simple. Users must always know when they're interacting with an AI.
Always know. Why is that so fundamental? It seems obvious, maybe.
Well, it's the bedrock of trust. Think about it. If you believe you're getting financial advice or, say, a medical diagnosis from a human expert, you place a specific kind of trust in that interaction.
Yeah, you assume empathy, subjective judgment.
Exactly. But if you know you're interacting with an AI, your expectations shift. You understand the advice is derived statistically. It's based on patterns, not on personal, nuanced human experience.
And the danger, if you don't know, if there's no transparency.
It leads to unwarranted deference, misplaced trust. If a user doesn't know the source of their information, maybe a complex legal summary or even a job rejection generated by an AI, they can't critically evaluate it properly. They might assume a level of human comprehension, maybe even moral judgment, that simply doesn't exist in the machine.
So transparency isn't just about labeling this as an AI.
No, it goes deeper. It should ideally involve understanding the data provenance, like where did the training data even come from, and where possible, achieving explainability.
Explainability, meaning the AI can explain its reasoning.
In essence, yes. Why did the AI reach that specific decision? The easier it is to trace an output back to a specific data point or a particular part of the algorithm, the easier it becomes to spot and correct bias, which, of course, helps fulfill the obligations of this pillar.
Okay, transparency is pillar 1. What's the second pillar? You mentioned this is often the trickiest one, technically.
It certainly can be. The second pillar is fairness, and the core requirement here is absolute. There must be no discrimination in the data, the process, or the outcomes produced by the AI.
No discrimination. Easier said than done, right? Especially given what we just discussed about biased historical data.
Precisely. And we need to stress bias is often unintentional. It gets baked right into the training data without anyone meaning for it to happen.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Imagine you're training an AI to predict future leadership success using, say, historical data from the 1990s.
Okay.
The model will inevitably learn that successful leaders, according to that data, are predominantly male, or maybe from certain universities or socioeconomic backgrounds.
Mm.
The algorithm itself isn't deciding to discriminate.
It's just reflecting the skewed reality of the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And thereby perpetuating it into the future if we're not careful.
So how do developers practically fight this? If the data itself is biased, what can they do? The source mentions auditing.
Yes, constant auditing is crucial. An ethical fairness audit isn't just a checkbox exercise. It's a deep dive into the system where auditors specifically look for things like proxy variables.
Proxy variables. What are those?
They're insidious.
Okay.
So you might explicitly tell the AI don't use gender as a factor,
Right.
but the AI, being a pattern matching machine, might quickly learn to use other variables that are strongly correlated with gender in the historical data.
Right.
Like maybe historical profession types or attendance at certain types of institutions, sometimes even things like zip codes or purchasing habits. It uses these as proxies to achieve essentially the same biased outcome, even without using the forbidden variable directly.
Wow. So auditing has to find those hidden correlations.
Yes, it involves sophisticated statistical analysis to look for these correlations and then explicitly adjusting the algorithm's weightings or maybe even removing those proxy features to ensure equity across the demographic groups you're trying to protect. It's an active, ongoing process.
Trying to force the system to stick to an ethical principle despite the patterns in the data.
That's a great way to summarize it, yes.
Okay, transparency, fairness. What was the third pillar? You called it non-negotiable.
It has to be. The third pillar is accountability. And the requirement is starkly simple. Humans must remain ultimately responsible for AI's actions.
Humans remain responsible, always.
This really synthesizes everything we discussed about the moral gap. Because AI lacks that capacity for true moral judgment, it only executes reasoning based on patterns. It cannot be held morally or legally culpable for its decisions.
So if we're building AI tools to do really complex, high-stakes things,
Like autonomous driving, medical diagnosis, financial lending.
right, then the responsibility must reside with the humans involved, the creators, the deployers, the regulators who oversee its operation.
It's the non-negotiable rule of the human-AI partnership.
But I want to push back on this a little bit, just playing devil's advocate for a moment. Pillars 2 and 3, fairness and accountability, they sound great on paper.
Okay.
But if we delegate really crucial life decisions to AI, often for speed or scale, think autonomous driving again, or maybe high-frequency trading or mass loan approvals, aren't we implicitly sacrificing some human accountability?
How so?
Well, if the human operator becomes really distant from the actual decision-making loop, maybe just supervising hundreds of automated decisions, can they truly be held accountable if one goes wrong? Is that realistic?
That is the central tension of deployment, absolutely. And the source addresses this by clarifying the scope of human involvement needed for accountability. It isn't always about immediate second-by-second control.
Okay.
It's more about accountability for the design and the oversight. The human creator is accountable for building the ethical design into the system from the start, ensuring those fairness metrics are embedded, that the transparency is there.
And the operator.
The human operator, or the deploying organization, is accountable for the context of its use, ensuring the system is used appropriately for its intended purpose, that it's monitored, that those fairness audits we talked about happen regularly.
So if the AI is a flawed tool,
The liability follows the human who designed or deployed that flawed tool or used it improperly. This rule ensures that the human element, the moral principle, is never completely divorced from the technological outcome, no matter how automated it seems.
okay, that clarifies it. The accountability stays with us. So if we agree on these three pillars, transparency, fairness, accountability as the necessary structure for safe, ethical AI.
The what and how.
Right. Then we need to shift to what actually provides the motivation for following those rules. Because ethics isn't just about rules, is it? It's about the underlying value we place on, well, on being human.
Exactly. And this is where we move from, let's call it structural ethics, to more philosophical ethics. The source introduces a fascinating concept here, the emotional equation.
The emotional equation. Tell me more.
The core argument is deeply compelling. Logic on its own is sterile. It's insufficient. It can process facts. It can derive conclusions, calculate probabilities.
The calculator again.
Right. But without emotion, logic utterly lacks meaning.
Okay, let's clarify meaning here. Is the source saying meaning is the same as moral value? Or is it something more like human purpose?
It encompasses both, but the primary focus here is on moral value. Logic can give you a roadmap to a predefined goal. For instance, logic might tell you the absolute quickest way to clear city traffic is to reroute all non-emergency vehicles straight through quiet residential neighborhoods. maximizes flow mathematically.
Uh-huh. I can see that logic.
But it's only emotion specifically. Things like empathy, compassion, that assigns moral value to the quality of life in those residential streets. The disruption, the noise, the safety concerns.
Logic doesn't care about that.
Not intrinsically.
Hmm.
Without emotion, logic is sterile because it lacks the criteria for human welfare. It just optimizes the target variable it was given, in this case, traffic flow.
That's profound. So intelligence, then. That's the ability to calculate, to process data efficiently.
Yes.
But the source states very clearly that empathy transforms intelligence into wisdom.
And wisdom, in this context, is the ability to apply that calculation, that intelligence, morally, humanely,
Yeah.
with the necessary foresight about the impact on people.
So intelligence solves the immediate problem, maybe, but wisdom anticipates the longer-term, non-mathematical consequences on actual sentient beings.
Precisely. And empathy is the bridge. Because empathy forces the AI designer, the human, to prioritize the value of human experience, human dignity, safety, above just the raw efficiency metrics.
And without this emotional component, this empathy driving the wisdom, we face the primary danger the text describes. Decisions become mechanical.
Mechanical and potentially very dangerous.
What does a mechanical decision look like in practice, in an ethical dilemma?
Okay, imagine an AI managing a city's power grid during a major natural disaster. If that machine is purely optimized for, say, grid stability and minimizing material asset loss.
Right. Logical goals, in a way.
Logical, but potentially cold. A purely mechanical decision might involve shutting down power to a critical care hospital to preserve the overall grid integrity for a larger, maybe less immediately vital industrial area.
Why?
Simply because the calculated monetary value of the industrial assets or the cost of restarting them might mathematically outweigh the immediate, harder-to-quantify cost of the hospital losing power.
Wow. That's chilling. That sterile, unfeeling logic, completely disconnected from the emotional reality of human suffering.
That's the danger of unchecked AI development. We have to explicitly program the valuation of human life, human suffering, the output of empathy, if you will, into the system's core design criteria.
So the emotional equation essentially tells us that to pursue wise AI, not just intelligent AI, we have to embed human feeling, or at least the principles derived from it, into the system itself.
That's the argument. It's about making the AI's goals aligned with human values, not just mathematical optima.
Okay, this constant push and pull between these theoretical principles and the very real drive for efficiency and profit, it makes you wonder, how do these abstract ideals, fairness, accountability, empathy, how do they actually play out in a real-world, maybe profit-driven professional setting?
It's a critical question. Theory is one thing, practice is another.
And thankfully, the source gives us a fantastic, very grounded example. It demonstrates exactly how these concepts like fairness and bias manifest in actual production environments. This is the case study involving the fintech startup in Pakistan.
Ah, yes, the loan approval system. This is a classic AI application, using pattern recognition on financial data.
And as we discussed, if ever there was fertile ground for systemic bias to creep in, it's historical lending data, right?
Absolutely. Decades, centuries sometimes of societal biases can be embedded there.
And initially, this startup system, well, it failed the fairness pillar pretty badly. The bias they identified was specific and quite significant.
How was it?
The AI system showed a measurable gender bias. It was consistently rejecting loan applications from women entrepreneurs more often than men.
Even when their objective financial metrics were comparable.
Or even superior in some cases to the male applicants who were getting approved.
And it's crucial, again, to understand the likely mechanism. The AI itself wasn't programmed with an instruction like discriminate against women.
No, of course not.
It was almost certainly just reflecting those historical patterns in the data. Maybe women entrepreneurs historically face higher systemic hurdles, perhaps leading to slightly higher default rates in the past due to lack of inherited capital, or maybe they were just less represented in the training data overall.
Leading the AI to flag them as statistically riskier based purely on those old patterns.
Exactly. The pattern led directly to unfairness in the present.
So how did they fix it? How did they close that moral gap in practice? The source details the resolution, and it involved immediate, pretty comprehensive action.
What did they do?
They initiated a dedicated fairness audit. And this wasn't just a philosophical discussion in a meeting room. It was described as a hands-on engineering intervention.
Okay.
And that intervention involved what the source calls ethical retraining of the AI model.
Ethical retraining. What
Yeah.
does that entail?
It means going beyond just simple data balancing, like adding more examples of successful women. They started using more advanced techniques, things like counterfactual testing.
Counterfactual testing.
Yeah, basically asking the system hypothetical questions like, if we take this specific application, which was rejected, and we change only the gender marker, leaving all financial data identical, would the outcome change? Would it now be approved?
Ah, I see. And if the answer was
Then
yes,
they knew the original decision was relying on gender or a proxy for it and not solely on financial merit. That revealed the bias.
and allowed them to adjust the algorithm.
Exactly. They adjusted the algorithm's internal weightings to prioritize current merit-based financial health indicators over those historical correlations linked to demographic factors like gender.
Forcing the AI to focus on the relevant data.
Right. And the outcome was significant. The AI began approving loans based primarily on current merit and projected future viability, effectively detached from those historical gender biases. The system was forced by direct human intervention to adhere to the principle of equity over the pattern of past discrimination.
That is a powerful example of putting the pillars into practice.
It really is. And it leads to one of the most, I think, memorable conclusions in the source material. The author doesn't just say, oh, they made the AI better.
What does he say?
He concludes that this whole effort to correct the systemic bias, which required deep human moral intervention and technical skill, wasn't just categorized as better AI. He says, quote, this wasn't just better AI, it was better humanity.
Better humanity. Wow.
That connection is so key for you, the listener. When we design AI ethically, when we force the system to adhere to a higher moral standard than the bias patterns it learned from our own past, we're essentially using technology as a kind of corrective lens.
A mirror almost.
Exactly. It acts as a mirror showing us precisely where our own collective human biases lie hidden in the data. And then it becomes a tool to help us consciously overcome them and build a more equitable future.
So the machine can only achieve true fairness if the human coder insists on it, defines it mathematically, and then audits it religiously.
Right. The practical application of those three pillars actually makes society better, not just the AI.
It demonstrates the potential, doesn't it?
Definitely. So, okay, we have the practical structure, the three pillars. We have the necessary motivation, the emotional equation leading to wisdom. To complete this ethical blueprint for AI, the source defines the specific virtues, the positive human qualities that must be actively integrated into every algorithm. This forms what it calls the human code.
The human code. This sounds like the core values we need to embed.
Exactly. It's rooted in those essential human virtues that ideally guide all ethical societies. Mr. Mir identifies three specific virtues that must form the bedrock here: integrity, compassion, and justice.
Integrity, compassion, justice. Okay.
Now, we need to spend a moment unpacking how these, fairly philosophical concepts actually translate into technical reality. Integrity, for instance, it's not just about telling the truth. In software, in code, what does integrity look like?
That's a great question. In this context, integrity translates to things like robustness and reliability. An algorithm designed with integrity is transparent in how it works, as we discussed with the first pillar. It's also robust against manipulation or exploitation. It should be designed to resist the introduction of deliberately flawed data intended to corrupt its output. Verifiability and consistency are key aspects of coded integrity.
Right. So it does what it says on the tin, reliably and honestly.
In essence, yes.
Mhm.
Then there's compassion. We touched on this with the emotional equation and empathy.
Yes.
But in the human code, compassion moves beyond just understanding suffering. It means the system must be designed to actively prioritize human welfare above purely mechanical metrics.
So in a trade-off situation.
In a trade-off, compassion ensures that minimizing human harm, physical or significant psychological harm, always takes precedence over maximizing something like speed or efficiency or even profit within the bounds set by the designers.
Actively prioritizing well-being.
Yes. And finally, justice, which you can think of as the applied operational version of the fairness pillar. Justice ensures equity in distribution and access. It means building checks into the system to look for disproportionate negative impacts on vulnerable populations. It requires going beyond just aiming for neutrality and sometimes actively seeking to correct historical imbalances.
Like in the fintech example, they didn't just stop the bias, they made it fair.
Exactly. That was an application of justice. It required positive action to ensure equitable outcomes based on merit.
This whole discussion really elevates AI development, doesn't it? It moves it from being just a technical function to being a deeply moral responsibility.
It has to. The source insists on this. The future of AI depends not really on the machines themselves, not on their processing power or their clever architecture,
But squarely on us.
squarely on the ethics of those who design and deploy them. The code, the moral starting point, begins entirely with the human creator.
If we're building systems that will influence billions of lives across healthcare, finance, governance, maybe even warfare,
The stakes couldn't be higher.
then those systems absolutely must reflect the highest human virtues we aspire to. We are, in a very real sense, projecting our moral future onto this new digital canvas.
It's a profound responsibility.
And the source adds another layer here, a layer of gravity and necessary reflection. Especially for regions with deeply ingrained moral and faith traditions, like those found predominantly in the Muslim world.
This is a particularly fascinating part of the analysis. It draws on a core Quranic insight, which teaches, in essence, that knowledge without guidance becomes misguidance.
Knowledge without guidance becomes misguidance. How does that apply to AI?
Well, think about it. AI is arguably the ultimate tool of knowledge ever created. It can store, process, connect, and apply information on a scale that dwarfs human capacity. That immense power is the knowledge aspect.
Okay, makes sense.
But if that immense knowledge, that incredible power, lacks ethical guidance, lacks the human code, the compassion, the principles of justice we've just been discussing,
Then its power becomes misdirected.
fundamentally misdirected. It leads inevitably towards misguidance, towards unintended, potentially catastrophic systemic harm. It becomes incredibly efficient at achieving the wrong outcomes, just as the spiritual text warns about knowledge untethered from wisdom or morality.
So, applying that ancient spiritual lesson to our cutting-edge technological age, the message is that the immense power of AI demands an equally immense corresponding commitment to ethical guidance.
Yes, the guidance, the morality, the human code has to be programmed in first. It has to be the absolute priority, because the potential penalty for misguidance at the scale AI operates is just too devastating to contemplate.
This understanding leads us to what feels like the ultimate powerful synthesis from the source material, a really profound concluding thought on this section. AI is a tool. It mirrors the soul of its maker.
Mirrors the soul of its maker. That's a striking phrase.
It is. How does the source elaborate on the responsibility that comes with that, being the maker whose soul is being mirrored?
Well, it implies that every single algorithm we write, every decision framework we construct for an AI, isn't just a technical act. It's a moral act. It's a projection of our own collective moral landscape onto the machine. If our society, our data, our institutions are riddled with implicit biases, the AI will mirror those biases. It will learn them, and then it will automate them, potentially embedding them even deeper into our systems.
So if we're ethically lazy or careless in development,
The AI will likely be dangerous because it will find the path of least moral resistance. It will optimize for whatever crude metrics it's given, without that crucial ethical compass.
but the flip side,
The flip side is hopeful. If we actively strive to embed those virtues, integrity, compassion, justice, into the AI's design and operation, then the AI can become a force for achieving that better humanity we talked about.
so the machine holds up a reflection. It shows us our own moral state.
Exactly. The mirror doesn't lie. If the outcomes produced by our AI systems are consistently unjust or inhumane or biased, it forces us to look inward.
To audit our own souls, not just the code.
Precisely. The machine is telling us something important about ourselves.
Wow. We have covered a huge amount of complex, really thought-provoking material here. We've gone from the conceptual moral gap
Right.
to the necessity of those structural pillars, the power of the emotional equation, and finally, this comprehensive blueprint of the human code, all within a pretty profound ethical and even spiritual context.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So to synthesize this for you, the listener, let's quickly recap the 3 critical points, the main takeaways that we really want you to retain from this deep dive into Mr. Mears' work on AI ethics.
Okay, point number 1. AI must always serve humanity. That relationship is non-negotiable. We can't allow it to be reversed, where humanity has to somehow contort itself to serve the machine's narrow efficiency metrics. Humans must retain sovereignty.
Couldn't agree more. Number 2, ethics and emotion are not optional add-ons. They're not features you bolt on later. They are the fundamental compass needed for navigating the digital age.
Absolutely. Without that compass, we're just charting a course towards potentially dangerous, purely mechanical decisions
Mm.
based on cold, hard logic alone.
And finally, takeaway number 3. Human morality is the invisible but absolutely essential code behind every single algorithm. Our conscience, our commitment to virtue, or perhaps our lack thereof, ultimately determines the character and the impact of the machines we create.
Our choices shape its choices.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive, the source leaves us with one final, quite compelling, provocative thought. It applies not just to the developers listening, but really to global leadership and society as a whole.
That's the thought.
It reminds us that as we gain mastery over these incredibly powerful machines, we have to be absolutely certain that we don't, in that very process, lose our own humanity.
That's a crucial warning.
It is. And the source specifically concludes by stressing that this deep integration of ethics, faith, and human excellence is essential, particularly for regions like Pakistan and the broader Muslim world. It argues this approach is key, not just to participate in the AI revolution, but potentially to lead it.
Lead it? How so?
By offering a model for developing intelligence that is both technically advanced and profoundly rooted in enduring moral principles. It suggests this could be a much-needed compass for the rest of the world, which often seems to be struggling with the ethical chaos AI can unleash.
So ethical leadership as a form of global contribution.
Precisely. That perspective really challenges you, the listener. Thinking about ethical design isn't just a defensive measure against bad outcomes. It could actually be a forward-looking strategy for positive global influence. It offers a foundation of wisdom that purely technical progress might lack.
A powerful closing idea.
It leaves us all with a question, really. What fundamental human principle will you ensure is programmed into the machines of tomorrow?